taking the gifts of Christmas, the words that are typically associated with Advent, and looking at how culture views them and then how the Bible views them. And we've been kind of comparing and contrasting that. And we're going to do that again this morning as we look at the word love. And love is one of those words that has a lot of different meanings in culture. As I was thinking about it, one thing that I thought is that love has been kind of boiled down to a feeling in culture. And this makes sense. My daughter, she loves, there's that word. She really enjoys Disney movies. And a lot of us probably grew up watching Disney movies. And in those movies, there's the princess, and she kind of falls in love with the prince, and there's these butterflies and the feelings of love and little birds that sing and so forth. And so this makes sense that love in our culture has been kind of boiled down to this feeling that you have. But when we reduce love to just a feeling, it kind of cheapens the word. And biblical love is so much more than just a feeling. And here's the truth for this morning, is that love is not just a feeling. It is a reflection of the divine. Love is not just a feeling that you feel, I feel this, but it is a reflection of God and the divine. If you have your Bibles, open up to 1 John chapter 4. That's where we're going to be hanging out this morning, starting in verse 7. It says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God." This is saying that our love for each other should come as an overflow for a love from God. You see, when we love others, it's not because of a feeling, but it's an overflow of our love from God. N.T. Wright, he says this about these verses. He says, God's love reflects in our own love back towards God and then rebounds to others, since anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. And so I love that. Our love is an overflow of our love from God. And what I also love about this verse, it says that love originates from God and starts from God and flows out from God. You see, and this is different than what culture says, where culture says love starts from inside of you, it's your feelings, and it flows out from you. But here's the truth, is that our feelings often mislead us and lead us astray. You see, there's in relationships and in marriage, there's this term called the honeymoon phase. And that's kind of the beginning of the relationship or the marriage where the other partner can do no wrong. And it's when you're in that honeymoon phase, even if your partner does something wrong, it kind of comes across as cute or fun. But then a year passes, or 2, or 5, or 10, or 20, and what was cute and fun at the beginning is now just annoying now. And, feelings fade. People change and feelings fade. Like, when I was, imagine me, but 20 pounds lighter. Like, that was me when I first got married. And I don't look the same. And Megan now has to look at a 20-pound heavier Jason when she gets up in the morning. Maybe for you, I don't know. Maybe what was cute is no longer cute anymore. What was fun is no longer fun anymore. Your feelings have changed. Maybe your spouse hasn't put on real pants or makeup in what seems like years. Maybe your husband spends more time on the toilet than he does talking to you. And so those feelings that you once had have long since flown away. And then And then you come across a coworker that truly listens to you without pulling out their phone. Or you come across a barista that playfully flirts with you. And all of a sudden you start getting feelings again. You see, feelings often lead us astray and don't have what is best for us. And that is why love isn't a feeling. It should always be a reflection of the divine. That is true biblical love. And so continuing on in verse 8, it says, anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. And this is one of those verses that, as I was studying and reading, I came across Matt Chandler, and he was talking about these verses, and he said that these verses have an ability to comfort, but also confront. And I love that, because that is what this verse does. It comforts us in knowing that God is love and he loves us, but then it says if anyone does not have love, then maybe they are far from God. And here is a hard truth for this morning, that if you have hate in your life, maybe it is a sign that you are far from God. We live in a culture where it is easy to hate. You can post something online or say something without having to see the person's face and their reaction. It's easy to hate against a people group or a person or a person online that you're distant from, and you never have to see the hurt or the pain or the hurtfulness that you are causing and the harm that you're causing in that person's life. We live in a culture where it is very easy to hate. But maybe if you have hate in your life, maybe that is a sign that the God you are following is not the God of the Bible, but a God of your own creation to suit your own needs. And maybe you need to reflect and wonder if you are truly close to God. And why is this? It's because of the last part of this verse where it says God is love. You see, God is love. Hate and love can't mix. It's like oil and water. They are incompatible with each other. And so if you have hate, maybe that is a sign that you're far from God. And that last part where it says God is love, I love that, because it is saying that God is love. It's not saying God is loving. It is saying that God is love. Everything that God does is love. And just like everything I say or I do or I think, and everything you say and do and think is from you, everything that God does is love, because he is love. He isn't just loving, he is love. Everything God does is loving because he is love, even if we don't understand it or agree with it. And this is a very hard concept to understand sometimes, because sometimes we don't get why God does the things he does, and we question whether it is love. But everything God does is loving and is love, because he is love. And if we read on in verse 9, we get to the part where sometimes we don't understand it. Like, I have a hard time understanding this. It says, in this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world. Like, I don't understand why God, who is all-knowing and all-powerful, why he would come and humble himself and be manifest into a human like us and come into this world. Like, I don't get that. I don't understand that. But this is part of the way he demonstrates his love. Like, why would God, who has everything and is all-knowing and all-powerful, and why would he come down, and the way he did it too, which is what we're celebrating this season on Thursday, the way he did it as an infant, crying and hungry and dependent on other people for survival. Why would a God do that? Why would God come into our world, needing food, needing sleep, getting zits and getting pain when they stub their toe, like when he stubs his toe? Why would Jesus do that? Why would God do that? And it's because of his love. And if we look on the last part of verse 9 and 10, it tells us, it says, so that we might live through him. He came into a body like this so that we might live through him. In verse 10, and this is love, not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son to be a propitiation for our sins. That word propitiation, I'm sure that is a word you commonly use around the dinner table. And that word is, what it means is, it literally means to turn away. And in the biblical sense, it means to turn God's wrath away from you onto his son, Jesus. And this is another one of those verses that comforts us, but also confronts us, because this is a difficult concept to wrap our minds around. That God has wrath for you as a sinner. God has wrath towards sinners. And this is uncomfortable to think about, isn't it? Like, we like to think that God has wrath towards sin, and God has wrath towards sin, but that God has wrath towards sinners? I don't know about you, but I sin. And to think that God has wrath towards me is an uncomfortable thing to think about. But God's wrath is part of his love, because everything God does is love. And so even his wrath is part of his love. And in fact, the more someone loves someone, the more capable they are of wrath. And this makes sense. Like, just think about the news. You come across a news story about someone halfway across the world, and you hurt for them, but you don't really have wrath towards the people that committed a sin against that person. But if that was someone you loved and cared about, you would have wrath towards them. You guys know I love to go in Costco, and I go into Costco a lot, and I see like kids in Costco, and they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, playing with the stuff that's out. I don't know, whatever, but they're doing things, and I find it to be, entertaining. I'm like, yeah, they're kids, they have fun. But then my daughter goes and does the same thing and does something that she shouldn't do, and I have wrath towards her because I understand that, I understand what repeated sin can do, and I want her to be the best version of herself. And so because I love her, I have wrath towards the bad stuff that she does. And this is true for God and us. God has wrath towards us. But it also says that in his wrath, he steps towards us. He sent his son to take on his wrath for us. This is what propitiation is. I was reminded of this concept a few months ago. At Fall Family Retreat, it's a great time. If you've never been, I highly recommend it. My daughter, she had eaten her weight in ice cream. and was running around with all the kids, having fun. And we were getting ready to go up for the Saturday evening worship. And so, but my daughter, she didn't want to go up. And so I was trying to get her to come up for the worship part, and she would run from me and so forth. And I finally caught up to her, and I was like, we have to go up to this worship. And she said, no, bad daddy. And in a moment of parental weakness that I still regret, I said, no, bad Maggie. And then she got upset, but we went up to worship. And after she had calmed down a little bit, I was able to apologize to her for that and tell her I didn't really mean that and that she was good. But it still like stuck with me, and it bothered me. And a few weeks later, you guys may or may not know that we struggle with her nighttime. And so we were trying to get her to go to bed, and I was trying to encourage her. I was like, we know you can go to bed. You're such a good girl. You can do the right thing. You can go and stay in bed. And she looks at me and says, no, I am a bad Maggie. And it was just a dagger to my heart. And the next morning, as I was thinking about this and thinking about the thousands of dollars that she's going to have to spend in therapy as a result of my actions, I was praying, having my quiet time, and she wakes up and comes down, and she crawls into my lap. And she looks up and says, I love you, Daddy. And I was simultaneously reminded of God's wrath towards me for hurting the one that he loves, but also reminded of his love and his presence and his overwhelming love for me at the same time. This is what that word means. He has wrath towards you because you are a sinner and you hurt the ones he loves. But he also has love for you. So much so that he sent his son to take on that wrath in your place. Romans 5:8 says, but God shows his love for us that while we are still sinners, Christ died for us. God's gracious gift is his genuine love. His love is perfect, even if we don't understand it or agree with it. And his wrath when we sin and mess up is part of his love, even if we can't understand that concept. Because his love is perfect. And this is good news, because if love came from me and my feelings, like my feelings often lead me astray, my feelings do more harm than good, my feelings is a bad representation of what genuine love is. And so God's gracious gift is his genuine love. But what happens when we doubt God's love for us? What happens when we're going through life and we seem far from God's love? That divorce still happens. The one we loved still dies. The prognosis is still bad. What do we do with that? John Mark Hicks, he's a theologian and author and professor. He says this. He says, everyone knows the struggles and hurts of life. We all have our moments, And what we know is that despite those struggles, God pursues us and ensures us that we are loved. God's love in Jesus Christ. The climactic demonstration of God's love is Jesus Christ. When the doubts creep in and the fears debilitate, I remember the cross of Jesus Christ. And so if you feel far from God's love right now, and you are doubting his love for you, my encouragement is to try to remember the cross. Try to remember that Jesus, he humbled himself, came down in human form, and lived a perfect and sinless life, and gave up his life on the cross to take on God's wrath in your place. And so when life is hard and you are struggling and you doubt God's love, try and remember the cross. And so if we continue on verse 11 and 12, it says this: "Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us." This is what God is inviting us to do this morning, is to love one another because of his love for us. And this is tricky sometimes, loving one another. It can be difficult. It can be hard. We live in a culture, as we've talked about, where oftentimes love is equated to a feeling. And sometimes people say, well, I feel this or I feel this way, and if you don't accept that, then you are being unloving towards me. But that's not always the case. Feelings often lead us astray. Sometimes the loving thing to do is to confront and address when someone is living in sin and not living the truth. And I say that with a caveat because you have to earn the right to be able to confront someone and address something in their life. And so if you haven't earned that right, if you haven't developed that relationship enough with them, then maybe it's not your place to confront them. Maybe find someone that has that relationship, that they can receive it better from them instead of you. And so let's love one another. Let's love in truth. Let's love in grace. Let's love without judging or shaming. Let's just be a loving group this holiday season. Because Christ, he came as an infant to take on God's wrath for us. And that is why we love each other. And so the best form of love that I can offer is that if you haven't accepted Jesus's offer to take on God's wrath for being a sinner and the sins in your life, I pray and I hope that you will choose to do so this morning. That you'll choose to accept God's love and accept Christ as the propitiation for God's wrath towards you. If you want that this morning, there's going to be some elders in the back in room 115 that would love to pray with you, love to receive you, and love to tell you how to make that happen. Please stand as we sing this next song.